It's Friday, it's Section 1904, and we have returned. I know I've been here in a different capacity. John has been here in a little bit of a different capacity, but now we are here on Section 1904 on this Friday, heading into the weekend where there's a couple things locally I think that we can focus on, whether it's the Padres in Washington, D.C., whether it's SDFC at home against Vancouver Whitecaps, one that needs no real hype or build-up, number one versus number two, and a rematch from June 25th, a thriller in British Columbia. But just want to start by saying, hey, thank you, John. Good to talk with you. You and I have chatted a little bit since Tuesday night, following my father's passing. And no, it was a bit of a unique couple of days here for the podcast. But appreciate you, appreciate Darnay, appreciate Thursday, just keeping the churn going there on the podcast. Really want to say also, as much as I've tried to reach out to as many people as possible via social media, whether that's Instagram. I had people telling me for a while, you need to actually post something on Instagram. You do a lot of stories, but you don't have any posts. I'm like, well, this is an interesting first post. Not much going on X, not much going on Blue Sky, but on the Discord channel. I don't know that I can possibly reach out to everybody to say thank you and say thanks for the messages. I tried my best to at least acknowledge all the different messages, but been a different week, obviously, for me. And I just want to say thanks to everybody who just took a couple of seconds of their busy lives to express their condolences. So it's meant a lot. It's good to be back. Hopefully we're not done yet. There's still some things gotta work through, some things that we have to arrange. John, you'll get a kick out of this. I know you spent a lot more time writing than I have. I'm trying to write an obituary. I'm like resisting the temptation to go to ChatGPT for help on this. I did not. I have not done that. I'm trying to put the finishing touches on it. So I don't even know what you're supposed to do with written obituaries these days. I think there's a site that you can go, you can post, and then you can share it around. Like, my mother said something about like, oh, you need to put this in the Standard Star. I'm like, the Standard Star? Is that newspaper still going? Like,
is that a newspaper?
I would have bet against that thing still being around. And then the newspaper in Florida. But my dad was 83, so maybe people of his generation still go and pick up the paper every day. So like, is that something that people still do? I don't know. But yeah, it's just there's a lot of things I think you're nobody could ever truly be prepared for this sort of stuff, but. Anyhow, this is just a lot of blabbering on. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to see your face because since Tuesday, we've talked through text messages and you've been sending me clips to use on the podcast, but I haven't actually seen your face. And I feel bad because a lot of our conversations are about the podcast, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to do it. I can send you a thing maybe. I don't know what the rest of my week is. And you posted that thing on Instagram. I literally said to Rebecca, because I noticed it, I was like, Darren did his first ever post on Instagram. I was like, it feels fitting, it's appropriately important for this to be your first post. But I saw it, and then I saw everyone who was like, oh, my heart breaks for you. I'm so sorry for you. And I was like, I don't remember if I ever said this. I don't remember if I ever said I'm sorry that you're going through this, and I'm here for you or whatever. It was just kind of the business took priority, but it's good to see you. It's really good to have you back on mic and in a live conversational setting.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I know I kept thinking this is kind of a shitty first post, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe shitty's not the right word, but this is kind of a bizarre one for everybody that encouraged me to do a little bit more. I'm like, yeah, okay, well, here you go. Maybe we'll see if we can do more. I don't know that I want that just to stand alone all by itself, but not exactly my thing. Not exactly my area of expertise. Maybe one of the things that Section 1904 needs to do is hire a social media consultant, since you and I think, have these similar apprehensions about how we approach this stuff, feeling icky about posting things, trying to wade into the waters of TikTok simply for promotional purposes. So yeah, it's, listen, you can prepare and think that you're mentally, as prepared as you could possibly be, I guess would be the right way of saying it. And I know lots of people have gone through it, and everybody's reached out, has been kind to do so. And, it does restore a little bit of your faith in the empathy that humans are capable of having when you think it's all but evaporated, it is nice to know that it is still out there, even if it takes an event like this to remind you of it, which I suppose it's his own bit of commentary. But yeah, I mean, listen, he had been a person in decline for a couple of years, and we just reached a point where, I have to say, like we recognized, my aunt and I recognized that he had reached a point where the next level of his decline was going to be so steep, something that he just did not want. And he just decided, I'm not interested in that. I can live with a reduced quality of life in terms of mobility and independence. I can live with that, but what I can't live with is what's next. And so from that standpoint, I think he just stopped fighting. And it's important to us. We had our opportunities to say our goodbyes. Things happened pretty quickly on Tuesday. I was faced with this decision last week about whether to stay there or whether to come back. And there is no right answer, right? Even with hindsight, there is no right answer. You could stay and this thing could have gone on for a while, or you could leave and it could turn quickly. My cousin saw him on Tuesday, and, I was driving home from SDFC. And I got a call from the hospital, and it was a doctor I'd never spoken to. He's like, "Hey, your dad's not doing well." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." I was just there. I know what you're saying. He's like, "Yeah, I'm a new doctor. I kind of came in." I was like, "Yeah, okay. Well, welcome to the conversation." And he's like, "No, I don't think you understand. He's not doing well." I'm like, "Are you saying he's not doing well, or are you saying he's not doing well compared to like today, like yesterday?" And he's like, "No, like I'm telling you, this is headed south." And my cousin had just left him, and I called my cousin Tim, and I said, "Hey, I just got a call." He's like, I didn't think it had taken that much of a turn. He's had his ups and downs, and he didn't look great, but he's looked worse. And, within the span of a couple of hours, we just had to sign off on certain things, obviously, and not to get too into the details. But, we all just as a group, those of us that were closest to him just said, like, he's telling us, he's talking to us. And, he said his goodbyes to my cousin, to my aunt, to me. I got his brother on the phone. I got my wife on the phone, which was really a very, he lit up when he saw her.
Sure.
Which I'm really, really glad about. And we got to say some things, and, we got to say the important things, and things happen really quickly. And, I'm grateful for that. I am grateful for that. And, that's, there's no, there's just no way to, I don't know, he's 83. And like I said, I just think facing some of the things that he potentially could have faced, it just wasn't something that he was going to do well with. And I think it would be selfish for us to expect him or ask him to prolong it and really live in a way that would be miserable for him. So, again, I suppose if you're somebody medically trained, you're probably like, yeah, okay, I think you're jumping to a couple of conclusions here. But yes, I am. And we choose to, because it makes us feel better. And, I'm writing this obituary, and I'm just like thinking about, like all the things, how many good memories he left behind, which definitely helps us, because my dad was a character. I showed John a bunch of pictures that my aunt, I don't have a Facebook account. My aunt posted a bunch of stuff on Facebook. And I'm like, John, do you have a Facebook account? Was this weird for me to ask you to go to my aunt's Facebook page? And
I was honored.
Take a bunch of screenshots and send them to me.
I was totally honored. And while we're talking about these pictures, a funny story for you before I forget it is I told my wife, I was like, oh, Darren posted about his dad. I was like, oh, it's his first Instagram post. And she's like, oh, I think I followed Darren on Instagram. So she opens up her Instagram, and like a few seconds go by, and she goes, I didn't know he had a brother. And at first I thought she was talking about your dad. And I was like, yeah. Like Darren told this great story on the podcast. I told her about the smoke bomb story, which the next day you were like, that didn't make any sense. Like, no, it made sense. I thought it was hilarious. And it kind of showed that you're a little bit of who your dad's personality was, at least as a kid. And she was like, I thought Darren was an only child. Like a minute later, I was like, he was. And she was like, no, there's a picture of him and his brother. And I was like, show me. So she holds up her phone, and I'm looking, and I'm staring at the picture for a minute. And she goes, don't the two of them look so similar? And I'm looking, I'm like, who could that be? And I was like, I bet that's his cousin. And then I kind of deduced because, there was an older woman there, and I know your aunt lives down there pretty close. So I was like, I bet that's Darren's cousin. So you and your cousin, who I just learned his name is Tim, in this household, apparently you guys look a lot alike.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the picture from his birthday, right? It's a bunch of us around him at a table.
Yeah, there was four of you. There was him and an older woman sitting down, and then there was you, and I'm assuming your cousin kind of standing up behind.
Yeah, and Leah. And Leah was in the picture.
I think, Leah was in the picture, yeah.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that? I look back at that picture, and, this will tie in the sports. So my dad turned 80, and his birthday, February 12th, Abraham Lincoln's birthday. I always had a bunch of books about Abraham Lincoln in the house. And he turned 80. And, the stupid NFL, they have to push the Super Bowl back now to, freaking middle of February, right?
Yeah.
So, he was turning 80 in February of, what would it have been, 3 years ago? I don't know. What the year is it? 2025?
2022.
Doesn't matter. And, he was like, I don't know how much time he has. Yeah, he was still in pretty good health. Like, he walked in and out. He had a couple of things. A couple of things happened late. But, nothing that was like too alarming. But you're turning 80. And, even that in and of itself at the time, based on the way he lived his life, I don't know that you would have made a lot of money betting on that. So, but, his birthday was the weekend of the Super Bowl. And I wanted to go and spend his 80th birthday with him. Yeah. And so I was working at iHeart at the time, and I said, listen, this is really important to me. His 80th birthday is Saturday night, Super Bowl Sunday. I'm not gonna be able to do the show on Monday. And man, I always remember Marty, what do you mean you're not doing the show the day after the Super Bowl? What are you talking about? Who does that in sports radio? This is the most important day for you to be doing the show.
It's Christmas.
No, it's not. I said, go find a monkey at the zoo to do the show. Anybody can do the show. It's the same show. You talk about the commercials. You talk about the halftime show. I don't even remember who was in it. I want to say it was the Rams. I think it was the Rams because I remember we were watching the halftime show from Los Angeles, which, was received interestingly in the place where I was watching it.
Bengals.
Yeah. So there you go. But, again, those were details that, and people are like, really? You're not going to work the day after the Super Bowl? I was like, my dad's turning 80, this is important to me.
Only happens once, Darren. Your dad only turns 80 once.
And I'm so glad we did that because, that really was, I think, the last time that we were able to, get him and get, that group of people together and go and enjoy a night where it was about him, and not too long afterwards, he started going into a little bit of decline, and I said it this morning, I went on with Ben, no Woods, and Paul. And by the way, can I just again behind the curtain stuff? I had a feeling that they were going to, that at some point Ben was going to say something. I didn't ask him not to. They did say, hey, listen, if this is too much, you don't have to do it. And I'm like, no, actually, it helps me. I did the broadcast on Wednesday night. I mean, even though it was an absolute shit game, it was nice to be able to, take your mind off things for a little while.
Yeah, you can only focus on one thing at a time.
Right. Yeah. I knew, and I put myself in the position that Ben was in, right, as the host, that he was going to say something. And I was like, is he going to do it in the beginning or is he going to do it at the end? Is he going to be like, hey, thanks for joining us. By the way, before you go, we just want to make sure we extend our condolences, right? Because I knew that Ben was that kind of guy. And, but I put myself in that position. I was like, what would I have done? Ben took a shot. I mean, he did. He took a shot. And
beginning or end?
He did it in the beginning. Okay. I was thinking, wow, he took a chance there because I could have, you could fall to pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
On a situation like that.
I had people that listened to yesterday's podcast and they were like, I thought, or maybe it was Wednesday's podcast, and they were like, I thought Darren was going to lose it, but I thought he was just going to start crying, and I was like, I listened, and I heard, there was some of that in your voice, but I actually said to someone who said that, I was like, I think if that happened, he wouldn't have sent it, but
right. Yeah, I thought about that too. I mean, I did that in one take, not that I'm super proud of not breaking down. It's not the point, but I also think that's why it took me a couple of days, even just for me and you to have a conversation, because I'm opening myself up to be, vulnerable, clearly. But, it was easier for me to be, I got 7-10 minutes. Let me focus on this. Boom, boom, boom. Very regimented, but I thought Ben that was an interesting decision out of the gate. I was trying to think, what would I have done? Would I have said something early, or would I have gone a little late on that one? But I'm not sure exactly. But where was I going with that?
You were talking about going on with Ben and Paul.
Right.
I think it was before.
I think that was an aside,
okay.
though, to whatever it was that I was talking about. But
80th birthday, Super Bowl.
80th birthday, Super Bowl. I don't remember either. It's it's not important. But again, it's like there's lots of things that you feel and that you want to say, and I don't know. Maybe I'll I know that you got to just get back to doing the things that you do. And I think that's what he would want. I know that's very cliche to say, like, this is what he would want me to do. And I thank Adrian Garcia Marquez for what he said at the beginning of the broadcast. He took a chance too, because I kind of looked and I was like, I'm just going to get into the match here. I'm just going to slip into this awful match and just start talking about Toronto Football Club and SDFC. But, I really do appreciate that. He just said, right at the whistle, he said, this broadcast is dedicated to Barry Smith. And that meant a lot. It did. It meant a lot to me. And, the podcast, like I said yesterday, John, I don't know if you checked the diagnostics to see where people were listening, but my wife sent it to a couple of people, and then like my aunt got it, and then it got sent around to a bunch of other places. So I don't know. So might be a little bit odd on that front, that I've heard like, oh, I played it for this person and I played it for that person. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's one way of promoting the podcast.
Yeah, right. Good thing I
subscribe.
Good thing I left the free preview. I left your entire thing in the free preview. I didn't cut you off at all. And actually, I thought it was like it wasn't really planned, but I thought it was like a good full circle thing with yesterday's podcast, and that like you started, talking about your dad a little bit, and then you went into SDFC, which everyone wanted your take on, and then I talked to Hannah Kaiser, and we were talking about baseball, but like Hannah is her little boy that she had just turned 1. And so she's running 2 Substacks, one that covers baseball and one that covers like what it's like to be a new parent. And so like the last, I don't know, I talked with her for about 30 minutes, maybe more. And the last 15 minutes was just about what it's like to become a parent and how it changes your perception of the world and people. And you just view everything through this different lens. And I thought it was like kind of this full circle moment of like Darren lost his parent. Let's talk to a parent about what that does to like me and Hannah were talking about what it does to like your brain chemistry to just like all of a sudden start viewing everyone in the world as like that's someone's son, that's someone's daughter, or that's someone's mother or father. And it just humanizes everyone. And I thought it was a good full circle podcast.
Good. Yeah, that's what we're kind of going for here are those kind of unique things, that aren't cookie cutter and the same sort of stuff that everybody else is talking about, Nothing against mid-season report cards and things like that, or buyers and seller talk and all the other sort of thing. But the reason why you want to do stuff like this is, and we will. Obviously, it's part of the conversation. But, you do want to at least have an opportunity to kind of be, it's the one thing I think that's maybe where I was going is I always appreciate that about Ben and Woods is that they were much better about sharing details of their private lives than I was. But, I just got to a point where like I couldn't keep it from the audience anymore because everybody, I was pretty private about stuff, and I remain pretty private about a lot of things. But, it just got to the point where I was going to Florida so often, and like I would take a red-eye flight, and I would land in Fort Lauderdale at 6 a.m., and I would rent a car, and I would drive 2 hours north, and I would go see him, and then I'd check into an Airbnb, and then I'd do like an hour of prep, and then I'd drive 40 minutes south to West Palm Beach to go to the iHeart Studios because I didn't even have these kind of tools to help me do it remotely. So then I'd drive an hour south, and the show didn't start till 3, and then I'd do the show from 3 to 6 o'clock, and it was probably not great. And then, 6 o'clock, I drive another 45 minutes north and I buy him dinner and I go hang out with him a little bit and you wake up. I literally would go to the East Coast just because it was easier for me to talk to doctors like on East Coast time than it was to wake up at 4 a.m. here and talk to doctors. So, I just did that so often. At some point, somebody's like, why does he keep going to Florida? I'm like, yeah, well, this is why. Not exactly something that I had planned, but something that, we just had to do. I just had to do it. I'm his only son, and listen, my dad didn't exactly, set forth a blueprint of how he wanted the rest of his life to be managed. So, he needed a little bit of help, and maybe that's something people take away from this. I know your wife and you often talk about estate planning, things like that, and building trusts, and trust, like an actual will and trust. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot stress enough, like, how important some of that is, just so you know what a person's wishes are. And, especially towards the end, to make that all crystal clear. If there's one thing I would say, I'm not going to pontificate about stuff or tell everybody to pick up a phone and call and all that. You do you and you operate, you do the best you can. And hopefully you're comfortable with whatever decisions you make in your relationship with whomever. But, the one thing I would say is, a little bit of guidance, does go a long way. I asked my dad, he wants to be cremated. I was like, where do you want your ashes? He goes, I don't care. Put them on the corner of North and Main. And I'm like, that's not helpful. North and Main was an intersection by where he grew up. He's like, I don't give a shit, But you can sort of see if you looked at some of those pictures. My dad was a real free spirit like that. I joked around, and people on Discord know this, and I joked about it with John because John's seen all these pictures. The man never wore pants. When we got married, we were worried that he was going to show up in a pair of shorts. Not that a beach wedding in Puerto Vallarta, that would have been, the worst thing in the world. But for pictures and stuff, we wanted the man to wear pants, so we bought him pants. My aunt works at a really nice department store in Florida. And
just in case he didn't have any?
Yeah, we didn't know, and we sent them to him, and he got them for Christmas because our wedding was in January, and he called me on Christmas Day. He's like, what, are you fucking dressing me now? And I was like, no, but we just need you to have one pair of pants for this wedding, like so you could wear a decent pair of pants and look good. And he looked sharp. He looked great. And, of course, he did do the end around because he wore flip-flops. But, that was my dad. Like, he just always, like, every picture I have of him since he's lived in Florida, which is going on about 20 years, like, he just, he's in shorts and he's driving a convertible and he's smoking cigars. And, like, that's all it made him happy. These are the things that made him happy. He was just super low maintenance. But as I said, like, us now, like, well, what do you want us to, what are we supposed to do? Like, do you want a service? Like, he didn't want to be paraded around and he didn't want any of that, so, I know people always say, well, let me know of any arrangements or anything like that. Like, he just didn't want any of it. He just wanted to kind of go and he did get to enjoy something right at the end of his life that I think, I'll think about for a long time. He was told, that food consumption is not part of his future, which was too much. And he just said, I just want a milkshake. And we got him a couple of milkshakes, and he absolutely loved them. And, that was really important for me that he was able to have, what it was that he wanted before he went. And that was his way of saying, they tell me that I'm not allowed to do any of this stuff. I'm going to do this, and peace out, everybody. You know? And I love that. Like, I do. Like, I take great comfort in that was, amongst the last things that he did.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a personal story real quick, and then I actually have a way to transition us into Padres. The personal story is tied into that. When I was like 14 years old, I had an uncle that I was pretty close to, my Uncle Chris. He was actually my great uncle Chris. And he was in his 80s, and his health was starting to go. He was on dialysis, I think like almost every day or every few days. And we had this big family gathering. We weren't planning this. It was just like, hey, let's all get together. It's Sunday. There's football on, whatever. And, he's sitting around with all the, his nieces, his nephews, his sons, his grandkids. And one of his nephews, I don't think it was my dad. I think it was one of my dad's brothers, said to him, Chris, are you happy? Like, is this, are you happy? Is there anything we can do to make you happy? Because, you've lived such a great life. And you're just going through hell right now with your health. Like, how can we help you? And he thought about it for like 30 seconds. And then he said, I've had a great life. He goes, all I really want, he goes, I know this is crazy. He goes, don't tell my wife. She'll fucking kill us. He goes, I just want a pack of Lucky Strikes and a bottle of Jim Beam. Just one more time. Just to remember all the times I had. And so immediately, like fighting for it, like 3 guys jump up to grab their keys. Someone goes to the store. They come back with a pack of Lucky Strikes and a bottle of Jim Beam, and they go, come on. And I'm not sure if they knew he was serious, but he was serious. And for the rest of that day, no one cared about the football. No one even really cared about the food. He sat out on the back porch, this house in LA, with everyone just kind of hovering around him, smoking a couple Lucky Strikes, drinking a couple Jim Beams, and he died 2 days later.
Yeah.
And everyone at that party was like, I'm so glad we could do that for him. Like, I'm so glad that someone thought to ask him, what do you want? And what he wanted was not what his wife wanted, because he knew it was going to end his life, I guess prematurely. and we gave it to him. And it's like, that's a life well lived, and you get to pick your own ending. That's ideal. On the Padres.
And I do think real quick, like that is important. Like that is an important thing. Like he just knew. He's like, hey, because he's like, oh, can you get me? I'm like, well, I don't know. The doctors are saying, and he's like, and then one of the nurses is just like, she looked and she's just like,
just do it.
Get the man a milkshake.
Yeah,
she's
exactly.
Like, I can. We can make him the milkshake here. I just want to say real quick because you just reminded me of something. So I was down there in Florida, and I texted this to John. I went out for dinner one of the nights, and I'm by myself. So I usually go. There's this place I go, this Italian restaurant, and I go and I sit at the bar. And there was all sorts of like just fucking chaos going on in there this night. But, I was talking to the bartender. I always like talking to bartenders. I'm a former bartender. So, when you find a good bartender who knows how to chat, like I always appreciate that. So I sit at the bar, belly up, get some food, having a glass of wine. And, he's asking, what am I doing? I'm like, I feel like I'm going to open up a little bit. I tell him, my dad's up the road. He's in the hospital. He's like, things aren't great. And the guy, I swear, like I never knew this guy, I never met this guy. He goes, let me tell you something, pal. He goes, I'm not married. I don't have kids. He's like, that's up for a reason. He goes, because when I get to that point where your dad is, he's like, and I don't know your dad. Here's what I want to happen to me. I'm gonna get a couple of hookers, and I'm gonna get a whole mess of cocaine, and I'm gonna get out of a hospital. If I'm in a hospital, I'm gonna go into a hotel room, and I'm just gonna have as much cocaine and hookers as I can until I drop dead.
Good,
because that sounds way better to me than dying in some hospital. And I'm like, for a second, I was like, could I check him out?
Sounds like something my dad
I'm
might
sitting there like, at one point in my life, this probably, would have been considered at some stage of his life. But, I was like, okay. I was like, well, I'll take your number and, we'll see how it goes and I'll get back to you. But we weren't that dramatic. Maybe at a different stage of his life, that would have been an alternative. Same thing with the Lucky Strike. Same thing with a bottle of scotch. But at this point in his life, it was a milkshake. And like I said, that was a good send-off for him. They call it pleasure food when you're approaching palliative care. We never actually got there, but he had his pleasure food and just said, I'm good, and let us all know he was good, and we let him know we were good. And that's a wrap on a life well lived. So thank you again to everybody. But Padres, transition.
So this is what I wanted to say. So so last week I talked with you about, hey, I've been taking clips from the podcast, like the video clips that we get when we record here, and putting them on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and Blue Sky, and people are really responding to them, right? We're getting a lot of traction on them, and it's leading to more people, finding out that Darren Smith is doing a podcast. Like every couple days, we get a comment, wow, Darren Smith, I've been looking for you. Great, I'm going to subscribe. I'm going to listen. And I think it was Tuesday that I grabbed a clip that I knew social media was going to eat up, which was you saying the Padres should just trade Leo DeVries and Ethan Salas because, baseball Armageddon is coming. So push in all your chips now. And, you said it with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but I understood that, but I posted it. And then it was like 2 straight days of TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky just roasting it nonstop. And like people just go, oh, Darren Smith, what's this hot take? He's fallen off so far. And like a lot of people, my favorite one that I brought up with Darnay was someone wrote, can anyone have a podcast now? And I was like, yeah, they can. That's true.
Yeah, you can. You have a phone, you can do it.
Right. I saw someone saying tariff podcast microphones. There was a lot of criticism, and it was still ongoing after you sent me the message saying, my dad has passed, and I think I need some time to put together. And like, I was sitting there as like, your partner in this business. And I like really wanted to just send a message to all of them going like, his dad just died. Can we lay the fuck off the guy, please? Like, it's more important than like, and everyone's like, oh, trade. No, you don't trade DeVries. You could trade Salas, fine. And I'm like, guys, there's much more important things going on in Darren's life. Please don't tag him in these stupid ass responses. Like, just leave him alone for a couple days, please. So yeah, it's, you never really know when these things are coming. And unfortunately, sometimes people like me fill your social media mentions with garbage as it's going on.
Well, listen,
Sorry
it's
for
social
that.
media, so let's be honest here. The exception is the nice things that people say. The rule is mostly the garbage. So, if you're going to be on that, you have to be prepared for it. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that you trade everything away to make some run, but it's sort of like you said. It was tongue in cheek with what we were talking about. The future actually doesn't look great for Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
So, I don't. It's something you might want to consider, but obviously that's just it's just banter. It's just a bit of banter. I was asked a question earlier this morning about the surplus of arms that the Padres have, about trading Robert Suarez or trading a relief pitcher, because I guess that was the subject that came up on the round table on 97.3. And forgive me for having missed it, but I think you can go from a surplus to real quick in
Real
sports.
quick.
Real quick.
Yes, that's what I
and
was gonna say.
I think anytime you think you have a surplus, see SDFC. Anytime you think you have a surplus of something, and all of a sudden you can find yourself going, well, like, how are we going to get innings here? And plus, if you think you're a postseason team, and I think the odds at Fangraphs are still a little bit better than 50-50, you would get into the postseason. That's all about shortening games. Everything up in the postseason is about shortening games. It's not about starting pitching. It's about shortening games. How do you do that? By having 3 or 4 arms that you really, really trust in the postseason. Now, if you don't trust one of these guys and you think it's time to cash in, that's a different story. But if you do trust these guys, just simply saying, well, we got 4 of these guys, so we can get rid of one of them, right? And we can bring in another hitter, a catcher, a left fielder. I don't know about that. I would rather take my chances, being able to shorten games late in the season and potentially in the postseason. That being said, this is all just being said in the abstract because none of us know what's being offered here. And maybe people are concerned that Robert Suarez is going to opt out at the end of the year. I suspect that's probably part of the calculus. But for me, John, just generally speaking, I'm not looking to move an arm here. I'm not. I tend to think I'm uniquely positioned and built with 3 All-Stars and potentially a 4th guy who could be added into that conversation in Estrada. That I might want to say I'm hanging on to these guys. This is a good hand that I'm holding here, and figure out another way to supplement the roster at some point between now and the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, have we learned nothing from the 2024 Padres, who bolstered the bullpen to the point that they could shorten games, and all of a sudden they started winning a ton of games? And it's like, even in the beginning part of this season, when they were winning a lot of games, they were doing it on the back of their bullpen. And it's like, why would you want to get rid of that strength? Like, I understand that people are like, oh, add to the bullpen, make it a stronger strength. I'm like, there's higher priorities. But no, anyone who's like, trade away Robert Suarez, it's like, the story you told, was it yesterday? The Jed Hoyer story?
Yeah, Derek Lowe.
Lowe. Yeah,
of course he did.
Of course he did. If you trade away Robert Suarez, what's going to happen in like the game 1 of the playoffs, should the Padres make the playoffs, is whoever comes in the 9th inning to close the game is going to blow the game, and everyone's going to go, of course, if they had Suarez, they'd be fine. Yeah, no, it's I definitely don't think you trade away any of the arms. I saw people like, oh, they should trade away Suarez and Cease and Arise and add a left fielder and a catcher, and that'll be a perfectly well-rounded team. And I'm like, look, I have 2 hands here, Darren, and a wooden desk. I'm gonna knock real quick before I say Adrian Morejon does not have a track record of being the healthiest relief pitcher of all time. And the other 3 of these guys are relief pitchers who throw really hard. I know none of them have really faced any injuries this year, but to think you're going to go the entire season with none of them facing any injuries all year is probably a fool's errand. So yeah, you don't trade away those guys. I think Arise is important for them right now. And yeah, like, okay. I saw this morning, one of the worst things that I just, not the worst use of social media, but it's up there. I saw a picture of AJ Preller at the airport this morning, and someone was like, oh, he was getting onto this flight and he was going to Chicago, and that means they're trading for Luis Robert. And I'm like, I know I'm about to say a very stupid things, but have you seen Moneyball? These trades don't happen in person. He doesn't have to fly to Chicago to trade for Luis Robert. He could do that from his phone in his office or anywhere else. It doesn't mean anything. But yeah, like I still think that they're in second place. I think they should trade for a left fielder who's better than nothing. And I think they should trade for a catcher who's better than nothing. And I think they should hope that everything works out great outside of that. The idea of trading something away would only really, like, I did that really long post that you probably didn't read because you have a lot going on Section 1904 of everything AJ Preller has done at every deadline since he became the Padres GM. And it's really pretty straightforward. If they're in second place or higher, he adds. They're buyers. If they're in like fourth place or lower, he sells. He gets rid of stuff and he adds prospects and he replenishes the farm system. They're in second place. You buy. And now there's I think you can argue, like, do you buy big? Do you buy small? I'm on the buy small side of things, but I don't, selling right now sounds insane. And I think it's just people are running out of stuff to talk about because they're like, okay, we've been needing a trade for weeks now. Like, we're running out of stuff. What are they going to do? Let's come up with some options that they're not going to do and talk about those.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, you and I worked in sports radio. Those are many hours that you have to fill. You just can't spin your tires, and sports radio isn't really built to talk about the the British Open. or what it was that happened on the Wimbledon final, so it's not really built for that. Whereas you and I can say, we're going to take a day off from just spinning tires and making up trades and talk about something that we think is interesting and is adjacent to our A topics here on this podcast, something locally. So, we have the luxury of doing that. I used to like taking the luxury of doing that because you had so many hours to fill. But yeah, it's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of waiting out there on sports radio. I mean, listen, it's Dylan Cease tonight. He hasn't won a game on the road all year. I know the record stuff. I saw that our guy Dylan from Letters to AJ wrote a little bit about Dylan Cease. So, I would like to think that even though a couple of days off for Dylan Cease, who knows what that guy does. But maybe he does view it mentally as a chance to push a bit of a restart button.
Fresh start, yeah.
Yeah, if he were to get a win and pitch well on the road, which is something he really hasn't done all that much of, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, maybe this is going to get into another groove. I mean, sports is mental. So much of sports is mental. So, maybe you can start convincing everybody out of the gate here that it'll be a different version of him for the next couple of months, since everybody seems to think it doesn't look all that dissimilar, except for those pesky results.
Yeah,
I mean, everything else looks the same except he just loses with an ERA over 6 when he's pitching on the road. So other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? So, that's the perfect phrase for him. It's like, everything looks good except for that one inning. Yeah, unfortunately, that one inning counts. So, you can't really just toss it out. You understand why you're like, well, look at all the positive stuff. Focus on the positives. What were you doing here and here and here? Forget about that. But that is kind of important. So, it would be I think it would be a really, really welcome sight for Padre fans and for the Padres, if he could go, weather permitting, and actually put together a performance that we really haven't seen all that much from outside of Petco Park.
Yeah, this is a take that I definitely would have gone to earlier if we were on radio filling hours of time, but I feel like the whole, like, it's mental is I think a bigger part of this than anyone wants to say. And earlier in the season, like really early, like a month into the season, the Padres went to Sacramento. They played in that tiny little minor league ballpark, and Dylan Cease got absolutely lit up. And Mike Schilt left him in there to like continue getting let up. I don't have the box score in front of me, but he went like 4 innings and gave up like 7 runs. And it was like every inning, it was like another like 2-3 runs, 4 or 5 like hits. And I remember going like, I hope he can flush that and move past that, because the idea that you're so bad and the manager's just like, yeah, keep on going, is like a little, it's a little jarring, and it could lead to some weird mental things where all of a sudden you're like, am I that bad? Is this what he expects of me? Like, no one's coming out to ask if I'm injured. No one's coming out going like, hey, are you okay? It's just like, hey, keep going out, keep getting hit, whatever. Like, well, you'll figure it out eventually. And like, it's good to have that confidence in someone, but it's also good when they're like really outrageously bad to go to them and be like, hey, this isn't you. Are you okay? And I wonder how much that one appearance in Sacramento still lives in his head. But yeah, baseball players, one of the things that they're generally good at is flushing it. Just flush the past performance, move on, and go, hey, I'm not going to think about that anymore. I'm going to move on. So, and an all-star break is a good time for that. You get out of town, you stop thinking about baseball for a couple days, you're not around the same people, and then you come back and it feels like a new season, but you're already ramped up for a full season. So,
by the way, there's another part of this too, because you and I can talk about Dylan Cease mentally and what it means to the Padres.
Yeah.
By the way, Dylan Cease, like the last couple of days, Buddy, it is July 18th. You are going to be a free agent in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Do you want that 9-figure payday or do you not want that 9-figure payday? Do you want to start considering a qualifying offer? Do you want to take one of those bridge contracts for a year, or do you want to go out there and be the kind of pitcher that a lot of people think you can be? If we can get wrapped up in, do it for the team. Who knows? He might have some mercenary vibes. I don't know that. I've never been around the guy. But, we've been through this a couple times, couple cycles through the clubhouse. But, for you, like for your earning potential, listen, nobody's going to sit around and go, man, I'm really worried about Dylan. Like, how much money is he going to make? He's going to make a ton of money, more than us will ever make combined.
Yeah.
But that being said, buddy, like you are a guy, if you want to go out there and hit a payday in free agency, well, it's getting late. It is getting late for you. So, people are starting to look at you differently than they looked at you to start the season. Not everybody gives a shit just because it's one inning here or there. This is affecting your earning potential. So, if that's something, I don't know that it is or isn't important to him. Maybe he's just like, whatever. Baseball's just what I do, right? It's one of those things you have to learn when you cover sports. Not everybody's out there trying to think like, oh, yeah, I got to do everything I can to get into the Hall of Fame. Some guys are like, I just make a lot of money and it's cool and I get to live this cool lifestyle. A lot of guys like that, and they do enough. And it's not unlike any other line of work, that people just kind of do it. And it's just a job and it's a transaction for them. Maybe that's the way Dylan sees view sports. It's just transactional. But, if he is the kind of person that has that professional pride and wants to be amongst the best pitchers in the game and wants to put himself in the category of actually being an ace pitcher, I would say this is probably a good time to hit the gas there, pal. Like, it's probably a good time for you to get it going.
Probably. But, there's also that little bit of like, he's got to make sure he doesn't hit it too hard because if he injures himself, now he's like really screwed with free agency right around the corner. So
then he's Blake Snell. He's Blake Snell in his Cy Young Award year. But, it's too late for that. Not saying he can get into that conversation. But what I am saying, though, is he can get himself back in the conversation amongst who will be amongst the coveted free agents of 2026. So he can get himself back in that conversation because I don't know that he's in that one right now. And then Darvish on Saturday and Pivetta, who's been terrific. And we'll see how much closer we're getting to Michael King and Michael Schulte. I'm sure we'll talk here at some point. So we'll see. I don't know that they can even. We'll see what happens with the weather and getting these games in. But yeah, it'd be a good time for him, not just for the team, but like for him to like, come on, my guy. What happened here? Also, I want to say thank you. It feels like talking about hot takes, trading Leo DeVries and Ethan Salas. There has been no hotter take or more debatable subject here on Section 1904, John, than footwear. So appreciate everybody continuing to chime in on rainbows and Tivas and private messages from Steve Garcia from the Emo Brown podcast. You can go listen to John Gennaro on the Emo Brown podcast. This week's episode has dropped, so you can go check that out. I heard good reviews. It's in my queue. But there has been an incredible amount of conversation about footwear that I will say at a time where I'm like, let me scroll through Discord, having people just send links to different types of footwear,
including my wife.
Yes, has been I am Birkenstocks and everything. It's funny. Have all the great takes in sports all you want. One of the things I learned 20 years doing this, sometimes they'd rather just talk about your haircut and your footwear and the kind of glasses that you're wearing. Those are the things that really matter most.
You told me that once before, and you told me a story that I don't really want to tell because I feel like I'm going to get it wrong, but you were hanging around with Trevor Hoffman, and you had some take about lettuce, and Trevor got you and grabbed you and was like, "Hey, I need to talk to you." And you were like, "Oh shit, did I say something about the Padres or him or whatever?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Your take about lettuce," and then he went into this rant about it. And I was like, "Wow, yeah, it's the stuff that hits people personally, not necessarily their sports takes, but their everyday life, where it's like everyone doesn't have a take about what the Padres should do at the trade deadline, but everyone has bought shoes before. Everyone has bought sandals before, so they have takes on everything. And if you tap into that, yeah, they go crazy."
Yeah, I do. I appreciated that. There's a lot to consume. I've had even Steve Garcia. He's going down to Guadalajara in a couple of weeks. He volunteered to pick me up a pair. He actually requested my shoe size so that he's going to buy me a pair of the I don't even know what they're called. Sandals, I suppose. Chunkless. He's going to buy me. Yeah, he's going to. He even posted it on his Instagram page and tagged us, which I thought was funny.
I replied to him because in the picture you can see he's wearing them on his feet, but there's another pair next to them that he's not wearing. And so I replied to him and I said, "Do you have a backup pair?" And he replied to me and said, "I have 3 backup pairs." So apparently these things are amazing.
Will Holder has sent me, what are these called? Bedrock sandals. So he sent me a pair. So he has contributed to the conversation. So yeah, again, I feel like we almost need our own tab on Discord to discuss footwear, fashion.
I think you should ask the SDFC guys what their footwear thoughts are.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. I mean, before we said goodbye to Milan Olaski, we should have asked him.
Yeah.
That story, I don't know. I mean, I will say, I tried to listen to sporting director Tyler Heaps the other day. He started his press conference at 6 o'clock and we were going on the air. So I got about 2 minutes. And it was just like, hey, we were far apart. And I'm sitting going like, how far apart could you have been in the salary cap league? Like, what did Milan Olaski want? Did he want to become a designated player here? Like,
oh,
how
maybe.
Much Maybe. I mean, but you're not going to put him in the same category as Chucky Lozano and Anders Dreyer. I know production-wise through 14 games, Tyler did make a point of like, we've had him for a year and a half. We know him. You know, he's been really good in 14 games, but we have been around him for a year and a half. It sounds like there was a deal to be made, and you know, some have said maybe it was the agent. Some have said maybe the player himself. You know, you don't want to get into that, especially me. I don't want to sound like I'm just a mouthpiece because I really haven't asked. But it sounds like there was some common ground there, but there was just a value that the Olaski side said, we have this unique opportunity to extend it, or we need to figure out a way to capitalize on the form by going back to Europe. And, didn't happen. But I keep thinking, like, salary cap pretty low. Like, how far apart could you have been? And Tyler's like, we were far apart. So I don't know exactly where the breakdown is. Somebody will have this news at some point. But, of course, you get one shot on target the first game that you play after Milan Olaski. Listen, I can say I thought the refereeing was bad. SDFC didn't have enough players to practice during the week. I was out there on Tuesday. I was like, where is everybody? I sent John a text. I was like, I don't think Olaski's here anymore. But I was out there and like they didn't have enough players to go 11 on 11 again. It was a short week, which usually lends itself to some pretty shitty quality. But all of these things are factors in the quality of the game. I don't think any of them are excuses for the result. I think the result was bad. And I know that there's a thought that the result was bad against the 14th place team in the Eastern Conference, so who cares? But it was an opportunity to pick up 3 points. And now we're going to roll it all into Vancouver. Yes, a win against Vancouver tomorrow is going to make everybody in SDFC's universe feel much better. But, I also think picking up 3 against Toronto, knowing that Vancouver's going to come in here, and the last time you faced Vancouver, you beat them 5-3 with 4 goals from Milan Olaski. This is okay, Chucky Lozano. It is your opportunity. Okay, Tomas Angel, you're going to be without Marcus Ingvardsson again. So, who is it? Tony Sanchez from San Diego Punto Football brought up a good point on the pregame show. He goes, hey, listen, this was the highest scoring team before Milan Olaski got here. Yeah. And, there is truth to that. But still, that one Wednesday, all of those things, it always felt, John, like it was going to be a dog of a match. It really did. But, guys were tired, and Chucky only gave him 30 minutes, which was interesting because he had played more than that the previous 2.
God, they looked so tired.
They looked tired. I thought Luca De La Torre looked really tired. The refereeing, like I said. I mean, all these things are factors into the quality. I joked this morning, how on Apple TV Plus, I went back and I watched the recap of the game on Thursday morning. Mm-hmm. I was so impressed that they found 8 minutes of highlights from that game because it was so bad. I was like, give credit to the producers and the editors. Whoever found 8 minutes of that game to put into the match recap, good on you. I don't know why that wasn't a penalty kick. I have no idea. I mean, how is that not a penalty? How is that not even a VAR review at the end of the game? That was a joke, and this gives me more opportunity to moan on about Yepe. But that was then. How does that not even go to the review? I don't know. But again, all of these things are excuses for the quality. It doesn't excuse the result. I don't think there's any excuse for the result. Toronto, Toronto doesn't even have any designated players. Like they literally fired their designated players. They're like, we'd rather play without you. You guys are cancers. Beat it.
Yeah.
And they traveled and they had injuries and they played over the weekend. So, there's no real excuse for it. They had it way worse than San Diego. But it is true. A win against Vancouver is much more important than a win against Toronto. But you go back to back and now 3 straight at home, maybe you're starting to expose a couple of cracks here that might be papered over with the transfer window opening up next week. So, you still have to get some guys in here. You have to get some guys in here. You can't get any guys in here. Guys can only leave at this point. So it's created a bit of a situation. But, man, a win against Vancouver, and you have a nice moment of exhalation, don't you?
I mean, it would make everyone forget about the Toronto match for sure, but...
Which was forgettable.
Yeah, I also think, like, you have to beat the teams that you're better than. You have to. And I don't know that they're better than Vancouver, but I know that they should be better than Toronto.
100%.
This is not an excuse. I saw someone, I think on our Discord, it may have been Alex Pena, the single most charitable take I saw from this game was that they were looking ahead to Vancouver, that they were looking past Toronto. I think that's way too charitable. The one that you did not mention on the broadcast or today or yesterday is I wonder if it's going to come back around. I wonder if Mikey's going to talk about it at some point. I think that the difference in the turf between Singing Hills and Snapdragon is a real problem for them because I think they're practicing in one environment and they're having a hard time completing the same things on a different field. Because what I saw was a lot of passes that looked like they were 80% the power that they needed to be. And I don't think it was an effort thing. I think the field was so chewed up that it was slowing down the ball. And I think they get used to a certain style of play, a certain effort of pass. And then you saw them like overcompensate. And then they start hitting them 120% the effort that it should have been on each pass because they realize like this isn't getting there. And they don't have that calibrated because they're not practicing on that field in that environment. And like they're not the only team. Like Vancouver, I think, is kind of the same way. But SDFC is better on the road this year than they are at home. Like statistically, they are better on the road than they are at home. So I wonder how much of it is they get to Snapdragon Stadium and they can't play the way that they've been practicing all week. And I wonder how much that factors into the exhaustion that we saw. My favorite moment from the broadcast, though, not that I was laughing at you, but like you were pointing out in like the 80th minute that Luca De La Torre looked like he was out of gas, and he looked so out of gas. And the second you said it, he saw an opportunity and he out sprinted everyone like 30 yards to get to a ball and create a scoring opportunity, like literally as you're finishing the sentence, which just goes to show you that these guys, they're amazing athletes. Even when he looked like he was out on his feet, like he was going to pass out, and all of a sudden he's out racing all of these guys to get to the ball to create that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that was a good bounce for him. So he did get to it and he created that probably the best scoring chance of the night, which is where
probably should have passed it.
Probably. I don't know. Did he think that Anders Dreyer was offsides? I don't know. Offside. I'm not sure. But, your point about the turf, I think, is an interesting one because, I'll give you a couple of examples that just popped into my head. One would be Luca Bombino passing the ball back to CJ Dos Santos against Houston.
Yes.
Where, it just didn't get there. And again, like I'm not in the meeting room, so I don't know if Luca made the mistake or if he thought that CJ was supposed to come out. Who knows exactly what it is exactly that's supposed to happen there. Maybe both of those guys would raise their hands and say, hey, we were both at fault there. The other one was what led to the goal on Wednesday night. So, there's a foul and there's a restart and Chris McVeigh is going to take the kick and McVeigh kicks it to Anders and Anders gets closed down on the right side and he passes the ball diagonally and the ball just dies right in the middle of the circle. Now, again, is Anders supposed to hit it harder? Is Franco Negri supposed to come out there and get it? Or does the ball just die there? Is it just a bad pass or is it miscommunication and Franco's not a regular starter, so maybe he didn't know? Or did the ball just die there, or was it all of these things, right? Yeah. But this is now, so Negri gets there late, and he doesn't get a good touch, and Toronto ends up with it. And in the blink of an eye, Corbenu's inside of the 18-yard box, and he gets fouled because Negri has to track back and race back. And maybe this doesn't happen if it's Luka, which is, again, they chose to give Luka, they chose to get him off his feet, Luka Bambino. And, that was a choice because he played in the game. It was a choice. I would think that Luka's going to be back in there tomorrow, Bambino. So, he had started 13 straight games, and they gave him off. So, again, these are choices.
It's a risk you create.
Yeah, but the way the ball just died in the middle of the field. Now, you said turf, and I think turf is it's right to point this out. But I also think playing out at Singing Hills, it's much drier out there. It's much warmer out there. So I think it's the quality of the turf. I think it's fair to question.
Snapdragon has what looks to be like almost puddles sometimes when they're playing. That it's so moist.
It is. It is also a little bit more. The elements are different there. Like it is it's not as wet as it is at the beach where everything is wet all the time. But
you're next to the river.
But it is a little at night after the sun. Like it does get a little damp in that building. So I do think that there is a little bit to that you're practicing in one way. Listen, I know you talked about the Pangea and about what to do with a stadium and all that, and I still want to get into that.
The WNBA stadium that Darnay Tripp wants?
Yeah, hey, I'd take that too. We're giving up on Midway. But, I do think at some point, like, I am curious what the future is going to be of that stadium. Like, who's going to run that stadium in 10 years, let's say, So, it's obviously not something that's going to change all that much this year. If anything, it's going to change for the worse because SDFC football is right around the corner. So,
yeah.
But, I think you're right. I mean, it's crossed my mind because I've seen these things live and I've said, boy, that was weird. That was a bit odd, wasn't it? I thought their passing was just not. It was much better in the second half. It was a much better second half. And, I could sit and point out positives. Ian Pilcher was great.
Ian Pilcher was great. I actually, really going into this game, I was like, I don't know if I really care for Ian Pilcher that much. He was great. And I think, look, he's 18, but like, I think Verhoeven or 19, I think Verhoeven's like, he's really wearing down. Like it seems like each passing game, he gets a little worse and a little worse. Yeah. I think Pilcher's making a strong statement that he should maybe get a start at some point soon.
First round, yeah, he has started, and he started in place of Patty McNair. So he's been a good passer. I think it was probably his best game.
Mano Dua was good too, by the way.
He's a presence, man.
Out of nowhere.
He looks different out there. He just sort of glides across the field, and it gave McVay an opportunity to push forward. So, they threw a lot at them late, but, this was once you get behind to that team, they don't do it much well, but that's like the one thing they do well is get a lead and clamp. Anyhow, so that'll be tomorrow, back on the broadcast at 7 p.m. So, I'm actually headed out there now, so I will we'll see what's what and look forward to the broadcast. Have a great weekend, everybody. Again, thank you for the support of Section 1904. Appreciate all of the contributions and the interactions and all that's going on here as we continue to grow and get a bit better. So thank you all very much. And John, you have a great weekend. Big plans for you?
Not big plans. I think we're having some friends over. My daughter's on Sunday. I'm going to go for a bike ride down by you on Sunday, I think. Nice. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to take my daughter to play tennis for the first time. She's showing an active interest in tennis, so we're going to try that out. Just, regular San Diego weekend.
All right. Sounds good. Quiet night tonight and broadcast tomorrow. Then we got invited to a pool party in La Mesa on Sunday.
Hey.
Pool party. Yeah.
Pool parties are fun, man.
Adult pool party.
Have fun with that.
I know. I miss having a pool. I like a pool. I'm much more a pool person than I am a beach person.
Well, if you ever want to drive all the way up to L.A., Darren, I got a pool in the backyard. You're always welcome.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I know. I'm very envious every time I go up to the Casa de Gennaro and see the pool in the backyard and the waterfall and all that good stuff. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Talk to you when we talk to you.